Hi there, this is sort of a bonus video addendum to my preceding one on a big article in Vanity Fair that just came out. It's actually a chapter excerpt from a book on all the behind-the-scenes chaos in ABC's Lost, and just how much this toxic management that the showrunner can do no wrong, they're on a pedestal. This was eerily similar to what happened to Game of Thrones. Now, I kind of buried the lead because I did say the most important point is the one I'm getting to last, 20 minutes into the other video, which is the show drastically changed for the worse when midstream they introduced a pay grade system, defining these are the core characters that the show is about and the other ones aren't, when this was an ensemble show when we started. And just how weird it was that that's the same thing that happened. So I split this off. I made a new video for emphasis. In the comments, let's talk about just how much the show changed season 5 onward when they instituted the tier system, defining in words. It wasn't just, oh, this is turning into the Jon Snow show. In words as defined by pay grade, he was the most important actor. They needed to give him stuff to do and would steal it from other storylines. And similarly, I didn't actually follow Lost after season 2 because I felt it wasn't making as much sense, in singly because of all these things going on behind the scenes and everything. But tell me also in the comments how this compares to what was going on in Lost between season 1 when it was an ensemble and season 2 and 3 when they shifted to the other thing. Because a lot of this article is an interview with the actor who played Michael on Lost, saying there was a ton of pushback about this. We tried to make a united front, it didn't work, my character got marginalized, all of this that was going on. And so I'm dashing this off that as I was editing the other one, I didn't have time to record this, I did get a new piece of information. I never knew what the other tiers were. I knew there was Tier A and they said there were 3, but they never really defined Tier B and Tier C. And last minute I Googled it as I was editing, I didn't have time to fix it, that I was surprised by what I learned about Tier B. And it grimly made sense in just reinforcing it's about the in crowd versus the out crowd. Short summary is Lost started as an ensemble show, and they instituted this pay grade system in season 2 that no, the stars are, this is the Jack, Kate, and Sawyer show, and sometimes Locke. And the other characters fell by the wayside. The Michael actor was annoyed about this, as were others. And this culminated in that season 2 thing where they're on a boat, a raft, trying to escape the island. The others attack, take Michael's son, Walt. And the next episode, instead of freaking out about where is my son, as his missing son is his all-consuming thought, it's Sawyer giving a story about his backstory and Michael intently interested in it. And, this never aired. This was the original scripted version. And he was like, this is absurd. It's not just that you reduced me to a secondary character, which is a problem. Even as a secondary character, you aren't writing the secondary characters well. Because inherently, it's like that thing we complained about with Game of Thrones. It's like dream logic, that if you just focus on the performances being given by the core trio, because they're shilling them for Emmy Awards, it almost makes sense. But if you try to follow the narrative arc of other characters, it doesn't make sense. Like, when you see the clickbait channels trying to put together the journey of Jon Snow video or Twitter image post, it kind of almost makes sense. But then you have a thing on, the journey of Brienne of Tarth, or the journey of Ilaria Sand, or when they go down outside of the core people, even the journey of Gilly or Marjorie Tyrell or something. The secondary characters don't make sense. It hurts everyone. That when it's not just that you're giving them more time, you've gone below the threshold of adequate time that the secondary characters needed. They're just props for the leads. And it was so absurd that his son is missing and he's asking how the core character is feeling. That he argued with them a lot, ad-libbed stuff on set because he refused to just do it as written. Eventually they got it better, but then in spite they wrote him out of the show. Though their view was, well, we're not going to give him more to do, so you might as well set him free. He said, ultimatum, you give me more or I walk. Okay, that's what we'll do. And it reminded me so much, I forgot to mention this by name in the other video because I've been saying it more than once. The Barristan Selmy actor, when they instituted the tiers, was season 5, same season they abruptly killed him off. Because, well, guess what? You're not tier A, you don't matter. When Barristan becomes a POV chapter narrator in Book 5. He is very important. He's a political player, like the major counselor. And he wrote them back a long letter saying, this makes no sense. This is an adaptation. What? The next book I do more. And how at Oxford Union, Benioff posted, that made me want to kill him off even more. It's so reflected in that that fight between Harold Perrineau, the Michael actor, and Lindelof and Hughes, the showrunners on Lost. So please talk about in the comments of just that you're not tier A. And that it was mind-blowing to me that the point he made that it was a divide and conquer strategy with the cast members. And it works both ways. It's both the core actors with enough clout are being placated just enough. They're not worried that the Sand Snakes are being written poorly, or that Stannis' actor is being shafted by all of this. But at the same time, it's not like, oh, Kit and Amelia were bad people. It is also, any hierarchical system like that is also a threat against the people in the top system. That it was a constant threat to the tier A actors. You don't want to be kicked out of tier A, do you? That was always, how could they go along with this nonsense in tier A, as it was getting increasingly weird, like with all the characters being marginalized, Tyrion acting stupid. If you think they wouldn't write out someone rather than, like, look what happened with The Witcher, where they wouldn't change things because the lead was telling when they threatened him to walk, and he did. I mean, that's a little different, but just with the Michael actor, we are willing to write you out, and you started out as a relatively prominent cast member. Now, I don't know if they could functionally do that with Jon Snow or Amelia. I mean, what are they going to do? Rewrite the White Walker storyline so Arya kills the Night King instead of Jon Snow after 7 seasons of build? Yeah. I don't think that they did that. I don't think they did that as revenge against Kit for something, because he seemed nothing but supportive of them from everything we've seen up until the Season 8 script read itself, where we found out about that. That if there was any genuine friction with Kit to the level of we're going to throw out that storyline, I think they did that for other reasons. It was a last-minute change, we can tell. And they pretty much admitted, we panicked that it would be too predictable. So at the last minute, we changed it. And weren't setting it up for years. But if you think it's beyond their capacity to at least threaten to, despite years of build-up, we're going to throw out your character arc, it kept the tier A actors in line, just as it kept the lower tiers out of power. And it's why all of these storylines are being dropped. But I knew of this, the news didn't feel like reporting on it heavily, that this was a major behind-the-scenes shift driving story changes. And in Season 5 they said, Tier A is 5 people. Kit Harington, Jon Snow, Amelia Clarke, who's Daenerys, and then the Lannister trio of siblings, that there's Dinklage as Tyrion, Lena Headey as Cersei, and Nikolai Coster-Waldau as Jaime. What baffled me, and this is the point of this video about the tier system, not just it's divide and conquer, it leads to office politics, the threat of risk-reward lets them bargain with other actors to accept their changes. I never knew what Tier B was until I looked it up for this, and for something like 7 years, I assumed it was the rest of the starring cast. The people listed in the credits, I'm writing wiki articles and stuff, the people officially listed as starring cast, because it's a big ensemble show, is 24 people. Like on a superhero show or something, it could be 7 or 8 people, but this has consistently 24, usually 28 to 30 starring cast members. And they're not all important. Like, Grand Maester Pycelle is technically starring. Varys and Littlefinger were technically starring, even in, Season 3. Well, they're important, but, it's a big 30-person cast. That's what the nature of it. And that, on paper, that isn't even technically the worst idea. That's why we naively went along with it for a bit of, well, Lord of the Rings, obviously members of the Fellowship are more important than random guards they meet in Rohan, well, I guess. Or, look, okay, this is basically about Jon Snow and Daenerys meeting, the Song of Ice and Fire. Well, yes, by chapter count, they have the most POV chapters. But there are other characters who they're like Barristan is a POV narrator. Brienne of Tarth becomes a POV narrator. Theon is a POV narrator. So all this time, I guess I functionally assumed Tier B is like other starring cast members and has like the other 20 people in it, plus the 6 from Tier A would make up the named starring cast, and Tier C is where they put the day players and spear carriers or something. That's not what they do at all. Tier B is just Sophie Turner and Maisie Williams. It's nothing more than, it's basically a subset of Tier A. For like the junior members of Tier A, who I think they paid them less because they were younger. And suddenly, once I realized this, everything made more sense about the way this happened. That for years, I thought Alfie Allen and Gwendolyn Christie were in Tier B. Because they're starring, because they've been in since season effing 2. Because they're POV narrators. That's not what they did at all. That Lost only had those two categories. The in-crowd and the out-crowd. And all of these years we were duped that when they said, well, it's a 3-tiered system, we assumed it was like a professional, rational, thought-out, tiered system. Like buying a cable package, or defining pay grade by like you're an executive producer, you're a co-executive producer, you're a junior producer. It wasn't 3 tiers in a structured system of star, guest, regular. It was purely the core characters and the not core characters. And within that core characters, it was an asterisk, is the point of this video. Tier B was nothing more than an asterisk next to Maisie and Sophie, younger members of Tier A who get paid slightly less, but still more than the out crowd. And of course, it is no accident that these 7 actors in the broadly defined Tier A, including Sophie and Maisie as it turns out, these are the ones that HBO narrowed down on, focused on, as the ones they were going to run Emmy nomination promotional campaigns for. Those things cost millions of dollars to run, they're all behind the scenes, and not everyone can win. And as I talked about in the main video, that the elephant in the room this brought up in Season 8, that some of the actors who they decided were not Tier A self-submitted and managed to get to the final round at the ceremony itself, such as Alfie Allen and Gwendolyn Christie, Theon and Brienne. That up to this point, the difference is I thought there was a Tier B that was all the other 20 or so starring cast members, and that like Tier C was recurring characters like Dario or something. No. To them, Theon and Brienne and all of those other characters were the equal to a spear carrier. Okay, there is some pay ranking by the day or something. There's a system for that. But it is an entirely, officially a different class apart from the $1 million per episode that the Core 7 were pulling in by Season 7. And that is nothing compared to that we are willing to run Emmy nomination campaigns for them. And just awkwardly, Alfie Allen is there and he's not part of the in-crowd. And just how much this compares to what happened to the Michael actor and the other ones from Lost. It is amazing that there was no Tier B. The one exception to that I said, well, it's really just Maisie and Sophie because they're younger, is Natalie Dormer's Marjorie Tyrell. But I talked about this in the other thing, that makes sense because we heard that she was fighting with them. Or they sugarcoat it, they say she was negotiating with them. That the official sanitized version is that Dormer approached them as they were writing Season 5, which actually had a lot for Marjorie to do in it, but at some point said, I want you to kill off my character so I can leave the show at the end of Season 5. And this is also around the same time that they were making the pay grade system, the tier system was being invented at this time. That might not be a coincidence. And the official story anyways, well, we told her she would die at the end of Season 6, and this managed to convince her to stay. Yeah, it's better than, ruining the legacy of my performance. That's the sanitized version. This does raise the question, is this how Marjorie dies in the books? Will she even die at all in the books? Or is this explicitly like when they wrote Michael out of the show, because he said, Either use me more or leave. I mean, she had a lot to do in season 5. It could be that she was disgusted at the incompetent management behind the scenes. When you listen to the Blu-ray commentary clips, I've posted these, you can tell she's a little concerned. But then again, she was getting so much content to do. Maybe it was legitimately, look, I can get work on other movies and stuff, and I'm getting offers. Relative to this, it's tempting to read in she was fighting with them. It could just be she was like, look, I don't want to be roped in here for 4 years. The innocent explanation they gave might actually be true, that at a time when they thought the show would run through season 8, they had to tell her, look, you actually don't live through season 8. And she'd be like, oh, okay, that could have happened. In fact, it's the one I lean to, simply because it's the most probable. And they might not, and this might be how they plan for her to die, but at the very least, if you could go into theorization, and they compromised and negotiated by saying, look, stay 1 more year, then we'll kill you off. I think that's implausible, very unlikely. I think the one that is a little more plausible is just throw money at the problem. That the only reason Marjorie Tyrell, of all people, is another person in Tier B is as a compromise. When they were making the tiers, she was threatening to leave, so they bumped her up a grade. Because she's one of the few people who can threaten to leave and actually have leverage. As opposed to, like, John Bradley West, again, the Samuel actor, is just those videos where he's crying, going, I owe my career to Benioff and Weiss. A lot of the younger people, or people from Northern Ireland who aren't like big Hollywood types who can go off and do other things, particularly the way, it's no accident that Harrington, Clark, these are younger people. Maybe Lena Headey, who had a career outside of them, can occasionally have some pull. But like the only ones I can really think of are like Lena, Dinklage, Dormer. These are like, you can count on one hand the people who might threaten something and actually get results. But think about it, there is no through line here. It's how, if you ask them, how did you come up with a definition for Tier B? It's the kids who were too young to be in Tier A, plus the Marjorie actress threatened to leave. That it's, why not Littlefinger or Varys or one of the other small council people who's also, you know, recurring role, or Grey Worm Missandei. It's, of all people, Marjorie. And not even someone like Indira Varma, who they really liked and wanted to keep on the show out of vanity. Like, wouldn't they want to put Indira Varma in Tier B because they're trying to buddy up with her? Because they liked her from HBO's Rome. No, the Marjorie actress was fighting with them. This was a negotiation point. And again, this ties into what the Michael actor was saying in the article, that they would use that as a wedge to play us against each other and break the actors up into factions. That if you're Tier A, you're worried you'll get kicked out, and there was one point, rarely, but in rare occasion, if you feel, I don't deserve to be Tier C, either promote me or I walk, you dangle that doggy treat in front of them and go, well, we'll kick you up into Tier B. That happens like once, but it's the promise of it alone is enough to keep people in line. So that's the big revelation of this, of just, it never occurred to me, the politics of the tier system. I already knew that it ruined Game of Thrones, and that they were focused on these Emmy Awards. It didn't occur to me that other actors who were not in Tier A were really pissed off about this, but like the Michael actor, kept their mouths shut. I didn't even know that other shows have this same problem, that Lost implemented the tier system. I've heard of this in other shows. It's not as much of a system, but it's called a Q rating. Martin himself has talked about this, that a Q rating is like when they do polls, public polls of market research of who are the popular characters, their quotient, their Q rating, and then this is a thing they did a lot in TV and lower level shows for decades. That character is popular. Start using them more, to the point you overuse them. I mean, remember when Family Matters was a show, a blue-collar Cosby show, and it turned into the Urkel show? Same thing. Well, that character has a high Q rating. That the thing I've heard specifically from an HBO fandom, the True Blood series, that it got really bad season 4 onwards, and what changed is, it isn't just, oh, you know, the writing meanders around. There was a specific and self-conscious choice to turn it into the Pam, Eric, and Lafayette show. because those were the most popular characters in the polls. They started rewriting the show to pander to that. And to an extent, you see that at every level. I mean, like, Bronn isn't a top-tier character, but they just insert him in scenes as a stereotype of himself because that was funny, rather than having character growth. Because Bronn, ironically, has storylines in the books where he has character growth, he becomes Lord Stokeworth, that they cut out to put in him acting like stereotypical Season 1 Bronn again. And I'm mentally now thinking of he's just doing another face take reaction joke at the final Small Council table, or it's him acting like Season 1 Bronn at the Small Council table. That it's when you have high Q rating that's high like that, and they just reuse you. But that's just for ratings. And it could be more than one character that they show off like that. There's a limited, narrow, it's like a funnel of people who could, like 7 to 8 people you could plausibly put up for Emmy Awards. So it funnels it down to, this is the Jack, Kate, and Sawyer show. This is the Stark kids, Lannister kids, and Daenerys show. And for that matter, even Bran. King Bran was never part of Tier A or B. Maybe they made a separate agreement with him, but that you didn't consider this a core part of the show because you never thought he could win an Emmy Award, regardless of who has a better story than him. I think I'll leave it there for now, but I wanted to split this off to acknowledge I never knew how the Tier B didn't exist, and there is no gradation. It's just the Emmy nominees or you're nobody, was what they did. I know they did this to Lost, and I want to draw more attention specifically to this as a problem.